think we're on. Welcome everybody to the last day of the Washington Bike Walk Roll Summit. I'm kind of sad. This is the second to last session. This is the Heritage Trails session. We have our last session at 4 p.m. But really glad that you can join us all. We'll let folks trickle in for a couple of minutes before we get going. I have a few slides and then we'll hand over to our awesome speakers. But welcome, encourage everyone to say hi in the chat, introduce yourselves, say where you're calling in from today. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. It is 12:32, so I'm going to get us going. Hello, I am Vicky Clark. I use she, her pronouns. I am the policy director for Cascade Bicycle Club and Washington Bikes. And I want to welcome you all to the Washington Bike Walk Roll Summit presented by Amazon. We are super excited to have over 600 people registered for this 5-day virtual event. And we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. The summit is virtual, and those participating are joining us from many lands. We acknowledge the land Cascade Bicycle Club sits on today as the traditional home of the Duwamish, Tulalip, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish tribal nations. If you don't know whose land you're on, look in the chat in a minute where you'll find a link to a map you can use to look up your place on the land. Without them, we would not have access to this environment. We take the opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. And I'd also like to note that we are recording this session, as we have with all of the sessions, and they'll all be available following the summit. The summit is hosted by Cascade Bicycle Club and Washington Bikes, two sister statewide organizations with a shared vision of bicycling for all. Cascade serves bike riders of all ages and abilities throughout Washington state, educating new riders, advocating for safe places to ride, and holding events and rides. Washington Bikes advocates for bicyclist rights, endorses political candidates, holds officials accountable, and works to shape policies that will make bicycling safe and accessible for all. We also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, whose collective contributions have enabled us to bring together 15 panels with expert speakers and registration free for all attendees. Thanks to Amazon, our presenting sponsor. We also thank our supporting sponsors, the Washington State Department of Transportation Active Transportation Division, that's a lot of words, and Eastern Washington Region. Thanks also to our general sponsors, the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highways Administration and Stacey Bain Bike Lawyers. And with that, but before we transition into the summit session, we'd like to take a moment to articulate the community expectations we have for all of the summit sessions. We'll maintain a standard of conduct to ensure that all participants feel safe and respected. We believe that every person has the right to be treated with dignity and respect and to be free from all forms of harassment. So we ask that all attendees be fully present in this session, be self-responsible and self-challenging. Listen, 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 and process. Suspend judgment of yourself and others, and use respectful language towards each other and the panel. Also, if you have any questions or concerns during the session, feel free to reach out to the chat moderators by just reaching out to panelists, I believe it says on the chat, in the chat bar. So with that, I want to advance my slides. I want to briefly introduce this session, Heritage Connectivity Trails, how we got here and where we're going. In a second, I'm going to ask HollyAnna Littlebull of Yakama Nation to introduce herself, along with Summer Derrey of WSDOT. But essentially, this panel is experts from the Yakama Nation discussing the need for safe, connected bicycle pedestrian paths throughout Yakama Nation. The proposed Heritage Connectivity Trail Network will provide 150 miles of access, incorporate cultural design, and provide mobility options for people on bikes, walking, rolling, and more. The trail network also represents coordination between over 20 agencies, not an easy thing to do, to connect the region and increase safety for communities across the region. Attendees will learn how this trail plan came to be and about the importance of connectivity in and through tribal communities. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to invite HollyAnna to do a brief overview of herself. HollyAnna, hi. Oh, you're muted. Happens to the
There
best.
we go. Shaklawit, Imi Naimo, Teen Mun, Wanna Hittite. Hello, my name is HollyAnna Littlebull. I'm from Yakama Nation. I am the Tribal Traffic Safety Coordinator for the DNR Engineering Program. I come to you with over 30 years of experience in public safety, starting out as a firefighter, and then being recruited by EMTs, and then recruited by the police department, and then recruited by Homeland Security. While working my way through college, I worked my way up from a stake hopper all the way up to assistant road supervisor. And so not only have I also helped build roads, but I also helped law enforcement and first responding as well. So I want to let Summer introduce herself.
Hey there, my name is Summer Derrey, and I'm a communicator for the Washington State Department of Transportation in South Central Region. I've served in that role since 2006. The Washington State DOT and the Yakama Nation are in a joint role through the TTSC, as HollyAnna mentioned. That's the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee. Through that avenue, we are able to come up with ideas to improve pedestrian and traffic safety along the Yakama Nation, as well as my role in terms of community engagement and education. Thank you, HollyAnna.
And I think HollyAnna is just going to queue up her slides. Might take a second. And while HollyAnna is doing that, I want to invite you all to, add your questions in the chat as we go along. And we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. Thanks.
Okay, are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay, I welcome you to a very quick and introduction to everything that we've been working on with the Heritage Connectivity Trails. We started out with a study from Eastern Washington University, who went through and basically evaluated the whole traffic system. Not only do we work with, as you heard, Eastern Washington University, Washington Traffic Safety Commission, WSDOT, but we work with over 20 other organizations, cities, counties, the state, and the federal government. And so most people don't know, and I really want to take a moment to let you take this in, is that Yakama Nation doesn't just have the reservation. The area that you see that's in the light color includes other counties like Chelan, Douglas, Kittitas, Grant, Adams, Franklin, Benton, Yakima, Skamania, and Kittitas County, Klickitat County. We have that as a ceded territory, so we have traditional rights to all those areas. And so if you're working on projects in those areas, it'd be nice if people reached out to Yakama Nation and said, hey, we're working on this. We know this is your ceded territory. Would you mind helping us with this? And so I just want to take a moment to let you see that area, which is quite a huge area that we work with. I don't want to spend a lot of time on data. I just want to let you know that we have the highest rate of motor vehicle and pedestrian fatalities in Washington State, in Yakama County. We also have the highest rate of American Indian and Alaska Native deaths. A lot of the problems is that these roads are not built to what you would see like in a city. They're still built to agricultural usage, and some of these roads have been here for probably as long as I've been alive. And so I just want to show you some of the issues and problems that we have with some of the areas when we try to envision pedestrians, bicyclists, other road users. And this woman's on a wheelchair pushing it with her knee, and she's leaving the walk safety lane and going into oncoming traffic. And so I just wanted to share some of the data with you while I'm talking about some of the issues that have witnessed and noticed and that we know exist. No crosswalks from the bus stop at the Pato stop in Toppenish, having multi-jurisdictions, which a lot of people don't really know is a huge issue, especially if you're a tribe. You have to deal with city, county, state, sometimes BLM, government issues. And one of the things that we found out is that pedestrian fatalities are occurring between 4 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's the highest rate for American Indian Alaska Natives, which is 82% of those incidents occur during those hours. And a lot of the reasons why is for simple things like this. This is a student leaving tribal school. We are working with Toppenish City and Mount Adams School District in White Swan with safe routes to school to try to address some of these issues so that this student doesn't have to walk in the lane of travel because there's no sidewalks in existence. Here's Toppenish High School on Ward Road, which WSDOT is working with us to eliminate an issue here. We have ingress speeding off of the Highway 97 onto Ward Road with egress congestion, no sidewalks, no shoulders, no crosswalks. We have a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone at the high school, and when you see there in the middle, high school students walking through traffic, and this is obviously in the winter time, which daylight causes some view problems issues. This is a grandmother walking along Highway 97. She just crossed over lateral 3, which goes underneath the highway. The box culvert and the guardrails force the pedestrian closer into proximity of oncoming high-speed traffic. Currently, there is no enforcement from Washington State Patrol on Highway 97. There hasn't been since 2014 because of retrocession. And so basically, Highway 97 has turned into the Autobahn, which people are calling the Yakabahn. So traffic is going way faster than 55 miles an hour through here when I took this picture. It was averaging about 70 miles an hour. Here's a parent who's taking his kid to the Head Start. He's leaving from Wapato going towards Campbell Road. As you can see, there's no crosswalks. He's crossing over a frontage road that runs parallel to Highway 97. While taking a pedestrian survey, we noticed this young lady who was leaving where you see the green arrow in the top right-hand corner. She was leaving from the housing unit called Mamachut, and she was walking to the Head Start, which is at the end of the line on the lower left-hand of your screen. Where the green is, there's sidewalks. Where the pink is, there is no sidewalks, no shoulder, no nothing to walk on. You have to walk in the lane of travel. And where there's orange, there's a shoulder that you can walk on. She makes this route twice a day, 3.2 miles round trip for each trip. So 6.4 miles a day she walks because the buses don't come at a time that's appropriate for her or her child to go to the Head Start. So she walks them there and walks home to go to work and then to go to school. And then when she gets off, she makes the same route again. And this is her. When we got to the Head Start, I saw her coming into the Head Start, and this is her walking across frontage road, approaching Highway 97 to cross over. When we got to the Head Start, we discovered not only was she pushing one child, but she was pushing 2 children. And the older brother was sitting in the stroller holding the younger brother. And she makes this trip twice a day with both those children in one stroller. So as you know, Yakama Nation, we have our own language called Sahaptin. And so one of the things that we do is this is one of my highest stolen posters on the reservation. And I've actually seen it in non-tribal members' stores because I know they stole it because I didn't give them one. So it's interesting to see that people are liking some of the posters that we're making in dual language to also encourage use of the language. So after we discovered all these problems and all the data, we applied for the National Park Service grant, which we received for planning for the Heritage Connectivity Trails. We went out and did community contact. As you can see here, we made some custom Bigfoots and Otto the Otter, who's for irrigation safety. We did over 400 surveys with community members, asking them what are their issues, what are their concerns. So we talked to road users like this bicyclist going the wrong way on Highway 97, riding in the median. We talked to pedestrians who are using irrigation access roads. This is along a drainage where a granddaughter and a grandmother are walking along the drainage canal to get from point A to point B. This is a real issue here most people don't have to deal with. This is two young men and their father who a couple of weeks ago during the really smoky events that we were having here in the Lower Valley, didn't want to drive to the store because of visibility issues, thought it was too dangerous, so they rode their horses alongside the road and through the fields to go to McDonald's. And so after we heard back from the community members, this is what they said they wanted. They said they wanted a trail or something like it, but not the Greenway and not like everybody else's, but sort of kind of similar to it. And they wanted it from Toppenish to White Swan. Members from Job Corps said they wanted to go all to Job Corps, which is further out from then Fort Simcoe. They wanted to go from Toppenish to Yakama, Toppenish to Mabton, Toppenish down to Goldendale area. Some of the fishermen said they wanted it along the in-lieu fishing sites. And so everything you see in brown is what came from the community. Tribal members who lived on the Yakama side of Attendees Ridge wanted trails to go from Fulbright Park out to the Yakama Mission so that they could have something to use as well. So after we got all of that from the community and we mapped the data, as you can see here, the epicenter is in Toppenish and it goes along Highway 97, which is this thinner, greener line that connects Toppenish and Wapato. The thicker, greener line is the I-82. And so this just gives you kind of an idea. Union Gap is up at the north in the center of where all of the accidents and fatalities and serious injuries are occurring for pedestrians from 2002 to 2018. So after that, I took and I highlighted the trails that the community wanted, and in the red you can see those are the highest fatalities, the epicenter being towards Toppenish. The orange is the second highest, the yellow is the third highest, the green has no fatalities or serious injuries, and the blue is where I added that in because Maud Adams School District is moving the middle school from White Swan to Hera, so I'm potentially seeing that we might have more children walking along the road, and so that's something that we're just going to keep an eye on and keep in the back of our mind. So this is one of the coloring pages that I give out to the kids when I go to community events because they're just loving the Bigfoot and the multiple languages. And so some of the projects that we work on, we have been working very closely with WSDOT. And so I want to let Summer talk to you a little bit about some of the projects that they've worked on.
Yeah, thank you, HollyAnna. The Yakama Nation, the Washington State Department of Transportation supports the Yakama Nation in their efforts for multimodal transportation throughout the lower Yakama Valley. As part of that, Yakama Nation approved construction of 2 roundabouts on US 97 between Toppenish and Wapato. The first, as you can see here, is at McDonald and Becker Road. That will be constructed next year in 2021, and the second one will follow that's farther down the road west toward Wapato, and that will happen in construction for 2022 or 2023. We have had a very robust communication and community engagement program throughout the valley to educate drivers on the benefits of roundabouts. And so we are fairly confident that in the future, we can go back and look at success measuring tools of these roundabouts for potential further development. As I mentioned at WSDOT, we are proponents of roundabouts because of safety. Roundabouts have added pedestrian safety features because there's fewer vehicle conflict points than standard stoplight controlled intersections. Through roundabouts, pedestrians only cross one lane of travel at a time, and they have refuge islands. At lower traffic speeds, roundabouts increase safety as well. RFBs, rectangular flashing beacons, will be installed at the roundabouts to alert drivers when pedestrians cross the highway. And then, so next slide, I think we were going to talk a little bit about the frontage roads. So there's a lot of lane miles that travel just adjacent to US 97 for the frontage roads. We are currently in the early planning stages in terms of determining right-of-way to see if there's ways that we can improve pedestrian safety along the side of the highway. That may be in terms of low-cost safety enhancement projects, to separate pedestrian traffic from vehicle traffic through delineation, just separating the pedestrian traffic from the motorized traffic. So I'm going to hand it back to you, HollyAnna.
Okay. So some of the projects are possibilities, and I want to make sure that you understand that those are just things that we're looking at, because you don't know if they're going to be options or not. And so a lot of the stuff that we're looking at are possibilities, because you have to think outside of the box when you're looking at areas when you're really congested with agriculture and with Wapato irrigation project and highways. So one of the things we did is we applied for the first mile, last mile grant, which we got. And so we do have a transit system. It's called the Pato Transit System. And this is a map of their routes. So you can, as you can see, they cover a lot of area. And they, besides the lower valley, they go to Goldendale and they go up to Yakama and Union Gap. And so one of the things we want to do is make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists to get from their home to the bus stop and back. And so we prioritize 5 of those stops that we want to look at because of not only population, but usage. And we want to encourage individuals who, may be challenged with gas money, because if you're making 50-mile round trip just to go to work and back every day, that starts to add up. And so we want to also encourage things like park and rides and, carpools and that kind of stuff. And so we want to make sure that getting from their home to that stop is something that is safe for them, because in White Swan, Signal Peak Road does not have sidewalks, and there's a lot of logging trucks that go up and down this road, as well as other traffic besides just individual cars. As you can see, up in the upper right-hand corner is the Totis Park, and the bus stop where it's located is right across from a high school, which is right next to a skate park. And so one of the things that you look at when you're looking at some of these projects is, how can I improve just a section? If it's just a section, it's not such a huge project, because if you look at the lower valley floor, that's over 9,000 square acres that can look very daunting. And so we started to cut these things down into slices as small projects that we could take care of. And so we're working with Mount Adams School District, so we're going to try to piggyback on not only the first mile, last mile, but also with the safe routes to school. And one of the things that I looked at when we were looking at grants is they were talking about bicycle locking systems and pedestrians. Nowhere in any of the grants have I seen, do you have horse issues? Which obviously you can see here is Casey, who's going to be working with us on one of our PSAs, is actually riding his horse down the road with his cousin. And so sometimes you have to think outside the box when you're working with programs like this. And so when talking to community members about how they want it to be unique for the Heritage Connectivity Trails, one of the things that we all agreed upon is that there's so many stories to tell here in the Lower Valley. And one of the things that tribal members is totally expressed was being able to tell history from our point of view. And so we're looking at, along the Heritage Connectivity Trails, of having storyboards that talk about the history of Yakama Nation from Yakama Nation history. talking about plants of usage so that farmers won't spray them with pesticide and kill our basketry plants like the dogbane. A lot of the families in the lower valley are still here. Our family in particular took in some Japanese children and my grandfather raised them as his own, and to protect them from going to the internment camps when the trains would come through carrying the Japanese citizens. And a lot of people don't know that that occurred here in the lower valley. So that's one thing that we also want to address. Wapato Irrigation Project and how it played a part in developing the lower valley floor and what it really means. The Cosmic Crisp, a lot of people don't know that was developed here in the Yakama Valley. And so that's a story that we'd love those farmers to be able to tell along the trail and maybe provide trees. Working with the high schools and the FFA programs, working with the Head Starts for community gardens, so that the trail is shared and that it's not just a trail, that it can be providing food and information and history and even the future. The agricultural industry in the lower valley floor for Yakama Valley is $1 billion industry. And so if everybody were to participate and contribute to the heritage connectivity trails to fill the gaps in between Toppenish and Wapato, Mabton, and even going to Zilla or Buena and Union Gap, connecting to the Greenway, connecting to the Cowiche Canyon trails. Imagine what everybody could do if they worked together. And so all of this developed out of safety, needing a safety corridor for the lower valley floor for pedestrians, which turned into wanting also to encourage tourism and doing things like highlighting the Toppenish murals and highlighting, that the agricultural industry here, as well as farmers and cattle and everything else that came along with the lower valley. And so I want to make sure I leave time for questions. And so I want to stop here. This is my contact information. Please feel free to email me, reach out to me. And if you have anything you want to ask, I'm here to share that now.
Thanks, HollyAnna and Summer. So I know that some questions have come in through the chat, and I encourage at this moment folks to throw your questions in the chat. I want to start with one question for HollyAnna. I'm just going to read it. It's really interesting to see that the potential trail segments that the community prioritized. What did your community engagement process involve?
So we went to, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many community events. We went to backpack giveaway. We went to community meetings. We went to, we invited community to come to our Tribal Traffic Safety Committee monthly meetings. Farmers have sent representatives to represent them so that because they can't attend the meetings, they have somebody who comes and takes notes and then shares it back with them. Cities have been coming to our meetings, like Toppenish City comes every single month. Wapato went through a change, and so their new council wants me to present to their city council to let them know about what we're working on and what we're doing. Zilla has invited me as well, so has Union Gap. And we've just done so much outreach. Before the pandemic occurred, we had a postcard that we are ready to send out that has a QR code on it that you can scan it and answer a five-question survey about what are your concerns, what do you want to see or not see, and give people a chance to have buy-in, because we really want the community buy-in, because it's so important to be neighborly and have those community people who live possibly along where the trail might be have their questions and concerns addressed. And so one of the things that we are stressing is that this is a safety issue. And so we want to make sure that the trail is also safe for those who neighbor it.
Thank you. Let me go back to my questions here. You know, I think a lot of folks are interested in how long this project has been in the works, what the next steps are, and how people can hear about those next steps and get more involved potentially.
So we started in 2018 actually doing community outreach. The safety plan was adopted last August. We are currently working on a pedestrian plan for the trail itself, a trail plan, so that we can apply for funding, because obviously it's going to be very expensive, because you're looking at a minimum of over 150 miles of trail. And so we know that that is going to be done in segments, which I think is totally doable. Like I said, we're looking at starting where the epicenter is in Toppenish. And so that's our main priority right now, because we need to stop those fatalities. We need to address those issues. And one of the things that Summer and I and the team have been talking about, because we have a Heritage Connectivity Trail team, and at those meetings we've been discussing developing a web page and social media so that people can follow along with the steps that we're taking as we're taking them, and then can contribute to some of the things that maybe we don't know about, because this is something that hasn't been done. And one of the things that has come up with talking with other tribes is, why don't we have, after we get done with our project, why don't we connect with the other tribes via the traditional trade routes? And so Colville has expressed interest, Nisqually has expressed interest, Chehalis has expressed interest, Umatilla has expressed interest, Warm Springs has expressed interest. So imagine if those tribes want to connect, how much bigger this thing can really, really get. And so that's something that, is like way in the future for me, because I'm focusing on safety for pedestrians in the lower valley floor right now. And so that's just something that, has developed out of just this little, what I'm considering a little dream, potentially could become something bigger.
That's great. I think you've kind of gotten into this a little bit, but I guess I want to ask a couple of questions about collaboration. And so I think even in the intro, I talked about 20 agencies coming together. That's a lot. Talk to us about some of the challenges there, and not just the bad stuff, but also some of the opportunities that have come out of that.
So when I first started, there were a couple of agencies who were very reluctant to come to the meetings. But I'm pretty good at finagling people's bosses and coworkers and wives and saying, hey, you need to get to this meeting and you need to hear about this. And I don't care what happened in the past. We need to work together now to save lives. That's the important thing. And so when you keep your focus on what's the real reason why you started this, and to me, it's saving a life. If we can work together and save one life, that's mind-blowing. And so you have to keep that focus. There's always going to be challenges, always. But I'm a 4-time cancer survivor, so talk to me about challenges. And I will tell you something else. And I will say, we can do this. We can do this. We just have to trudge through the mud. And if I can trudge through chemo and radiation, you can trudge through this obstacle with me. And I've worked in public safety my whole life. So I know about political challenges. I know about community challenges, personality challenges. I worked my whole life in it. So you just have to keep that focus of the project and what you're trying to accomplish, and collaborating with as many agencies as we are, and that's still growing every day. I mean, 20 was a couple of months ago. We're probably now close to 30, maybe 35, possibly agencies that are coming into our organization to help collaborate. And to me, collaboration is part of the solution. It's part of that bridge to get you to where you want to go, because I'm your responder. I know how to look at the data and go, okay, and I know how to look at the road and tell you what some of the issues are. I'm not a writer. I write grants, but I have people who review everything for me because that is not my strong suit. And so you have to have those other individuals there who have that. Like for Summer, she tells me, I like the stories. Make sure you focus on the stories because you're a good storyteller. Well, I'm good at that part. And so you have to have multiple people help you because it gives you that full 360 degrees perspective.
I appreciate that. There are some questions about the stories, but I'm going to keep on collaboration for a second. So one of the questions, WSDOT does not look like this across the state. What have you done in the lower Yakama Valley / Yakama Nation areas to build this relationship?
Yeah, I can
Summer.
briefly touch on that for a second. You know, it is my opinion that listening has been key. Understanding a population or a culture within the context of itself. It's one thing for the DOT to say, we like roundabouts, let's build these. But it's another thing to say, let's look at the whole picture. Let's look at all transportation aspects throughout the lower Yakama Valley, and how can we come to the same table to improve that? As noted, the acronym TTSC, the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee, has been an absolute asset so that we can all come to the table with various agencies across our valley so that we can talk about all of our needs and address those individually and work from there. So really coming to the same table and having a place and a venue to do that has been extremely valuable. And also the community engagement program, which HollyAnna mentioned on, has been helpful. We're interested in what the community wants. And so we've sent out a series of surveys. We try to keep them as short as possible so we can keep their attention. In addition to, prior to the pandemic, we were able to really get in the community every single fair, festival, event, and share our messages, everything from canal safety to bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, highway safety. And it's something that in this new world we need to continue with our online open houses, which we'll have in the very near future for the US 97 construction projects. HollyAnna?
So the one thing I want to say is that when WSDOT came to the tribe, they had it pretty rough. I mean, council was pretty rough with them. But the thing that I loved is that they came to us and said, hey, how do we do this? And so they came to every event with us. The people saw them. The people got to know them. The people started talking to them. And I will admit, I was one of those naysayers who was like, I hate roundabouts. But after learning from them about roundabouts and that the roundabout that they were talking about was not going to be like the one in Union Gap, that it was going to be bigger, and listening to them and having that actual conversation where one talks and one listens and then the other person talks, the other person listens, they built a relationship with the tribe because they wanted to. And you have to have those personalities in that department who will come to the table, who will sit down, have coffee with you, who will sit down and eat with you, who will actually come to you and talk. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is building those kind of relationships. And I do want to give a shout out, Summer, the Wall of Fame. I nominated them, and then it got switched, and I guess we both got it. And so we got an award from my understanding. And it's just been that kind of great thing that has happened. And you have to let that happen. You have to come together.
I love hearing that. I'm hearing a lot about just building real relationships that are long lasting and really persisting and persevering and knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? So that's really cool. Thank you for teasing that out. I think that's really, really helpful. I guess, I think, Summer, you touched on COVID, and so just teasing that out a little bit more, how has COVID impacted this project over the last few months? It sounds like you have some plans for more outreach, but what's been happening?
HollyAnna can speak to tribal operations themselves, but behind the scenes, we're still moving forward with the construction of the first roundabout on US 97 that's scheduled next year for 2021. The DOT has actually been fairly successful in our online open houses overall. I've done some recently on the I-90 corridor, and we get online attendance. We host open houses for a period of 2 weeks for people to sort of come as they please. And the attendance has been upward of, I want to say 10,000 people, as opposed to an in-person open house that draws 50 to 100 people in person. So even though we have this pandemic, we still have a captive audience. They're still at their computers. And so we're getting probably more education out there and attention to people than, in my opinion, we would otherwise. HollyAnna, I don't know.
Yeah, Yakama Nation only recently has opened up to more hours a day. Currently, the tribe is only operating Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the actual offices. Some employees like myself are working from home Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And so for me, I've been working the whole time. So it hasn't affected me as much as the program. Heritage Connectivity Trails did slow down a bit. But if you're realistic in your thinking about what you're really working on, the Heritage Connectivity Trails is a long project. I mean, we're talking years, and we knew this going into it. And so we expected hiccups, we expected challenges. I'm a former right-of-way specialist, so I know that right-of-way issues are huge. And so I'm not expecting anything to go quickly. And so making sure that your expectations are in check, that really helps. Expect challenges. If you expect them, then you know that they're going to come, and you add a buffer time. And the Heritage Connectivity Trails doesn't have a deadline. And so we're just going to be consistently working on it and working on it and working on it and working on it. But like I said, we're taking it in segments. We're taking a little piece and trying to see if we can solve that little issue. And if that little issue can be solved and we can fix that piece, then we go on to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. So I'm just thinking of kind of like Legos. I mean, we have all these Legos, but you got to start somewhere. And you start with one piece.
Thanks, that's great. I guess I want to ask my own little question. What do you see as the benefit of speaking to, of focusing on a network? It sounds like in terms of implementation, it's going to be piece by piece. And so I wonder if you can help the audience understand the benefit of thinking in terms of a network while maybe implementing obviously to build to a network, but not just with this all or nothing mindset.
Yeah, so coming into it, we had the big picture. This is what we would love to have. You have to dream. And so when we started talking about it, and of course I know about the Greenway because I used to live in Tieton and I used to use the Greenway all the time. And so I knew that when I went to a WSDOT meeting and I heard the City of Union Gap talking about their revitalization project and the I-82 interchange and connecting the Greenway through Union Gap through town to the end of the town, I was like, this is exactly what we need. They are on the same page we're on. And you have to have that networking. You have to reach out and let people know what you're doing, because There's no way we can know what everybody is working on. And then that's what friends are. That's what collaboration is. Then you can go, hey, Union Gap is going, hey, you're working on a trail plan thing? And we're like, yeah. And then they're like, well, we need to connect. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And so if we can connect to them, then that connects to the Greenway, which then could possibly connect to Cowiche Canyon, which, you know, we never knew about the 72 Second Street project and trying to bring it down into Attenum, and Zilla working on their project. And we knew about Toppenish murals because I've walked that before. But then filling those gaps, that's the most important thing we're doing. We're trying to fill those gaps. And then that way, the project isn't so big. Then you're taking pieces, and those pieces are doable. If we can connect Toppenish to Wapato, that will be amazing. If we can connect Union Gap to Wapato, that will be even huger. I mean, that will be a monstrous success. And so you have to have the network, and you have to tell people what you're doing so that people on all levels of government know or have access to know, hey, this is what the Valley's doing. And I don't look at this just for Yakama Nation. This is for the Valley. This is for all of the community members of the Valley. And so that's what it's for.
That's great.
Well, I want to jump in really quick. You know, HollyAnna's vision for this trail, you know, she mentioned we are taking the very first step here. This is decades in the making. And so long term, we can see this trail as somewhat being a pilgrimage from basically Natchez to the lower valley. And so we talk about agritourism and the possibilities here with this trail. And it's really something to be a part of in the very early planning stages.
Okay, that's a good segue into my next question. This is great. I think folks are trying to understand, okay, so how do you envision the trails when they're built out in respect to the roadways? Will they be close to the road? Are they kind of adjacent, or is it really about getting away from the roadway system? And yeah, or a bit of both?
We have no idea. We have no idea. That is part of what I was talking about with the right-of-way issues and multi-jurisdictions, because me as a traffic safety person, I don't want them anywhere near the roadway. I want them away from the roadway. And so I'm looking at some other possibilities, which I don't even want to bring up because that could be just opening another can of worms. But we're looking at some opportunities to get away from the roadway. And if that works out, then we don't have to worry about being right next to Highway 97. We can get the pedestrians and the bicyclists away. But you also have to work in respect not only to other jurisdictions, but also to personal beliefs. And so respecting the tribal beliefs and making sure that, you know, everybody's in a compromise that's happy, that's a huge hurdle. But right now, we're just trying to focus on the epicenter of Toppenish to take away those issues and challenges that are causing so many pedestrians to die from occurrences with motor vehicles. And so that's our main focus right now. Eventually, we will get to those other segments that will build on and connect. And so right now, we're just trying to address some issues with pedestrian safety of like getting a simple crosswalk, you know, and taking care of those things, and eventually it'll grow. It's like a chain. We're trying to build a chain.
That's great. Okay, this is a long question. I'm just going to read it. So what are the considerations around, and this is like getting into like 15 million steps from now, but important. What are the considerations around construction materials you're thinking around in terms of the effect of building and process on community health and Mother Earth? Not using harmful pesticides and honoring the communities and spiritual guidance.
So the tribe is very ecologically conscious, especially me, because I am a basket maker. I do work with, animals. And so I am that's at the forefront of my thinking. And so, for example, if it was like, say, a trail out by White Swan, it might be just a hardened dirt trail or a gravel trail or something it's obvious it's a pathway, but it's meant to blend in with surrounding environment. Because out there, that's going to be more of a horse trail for those individuals who, I was one of them. Me and my brothers used to pretend we were Olmec Stampede horse suicide racers. And so I know exactly what they're talking about out there, where you have all these families who are horseback riders. And so not only are we going to be cognizant of the environment, but what area of the trail is going to be most used by certain users. And so people can walk on gravel, people can ride their bike on gravel. I used to be roller derby. I'm not going to roller derby on gravel. So those kind of things, that's up to the road user or the path user to know that kind of stuff. But that's way far away in, down the road. But most definitely the tribe is, and me especially, are going to be very cognizant about no pesticides, herbicides along the trail. No, because we want to have those gardens that show the natural plants in their state and possibly might help save some of those plants and rebuild their population, because it's really hard to find some of those things nowadays.
That's great. Okay, so I think you've sort of touched on this a little bit, but there was a specific question about, I'll just read it. How broadly do you think the usage of this extensive trail system will be? And so I appreciate you started talking about different user types, but I think there's I think in there there's a question about like levels of usage in addition to different types of users.
Yeah, so we do know that like the highest usage area would probably be from Toppenish to Yakama, because that's where the data shows the most serious injuries and fatalities. And then on a daily basis, I travel from Union Gap to Toppenish when I'm not COVID confined, because my office is in Toppenish and I live in Union Gap. So I travel that route every day. So I see those people walking, I see them biking, I see them skateboarding down the highway. I'm still trying to find that kid to tell him to stop that. But we know that that's going to be the high usage area. So we do know that that area, we want to be away from the highway, if possible. And that one of the things that we have talked about is having an app, and so that people can check in and say, I'm on the trail, and then you can check out when you leave. And somebody else said, well, you can have usage meters that, I've did this many miles on the trail and da-da-da-da, and whatever else those app people come up with. But for me, it was more about safety. So you can check in and check out. So we know that you made it from point A to point B, because former police officer here, I want to know that people are safe. And that's my main concern. And so we do know that those areas are going to be probably not gravel. They're probably going to be paved. I don't know. We don't know yet. We had one individual bring us a example from overseas where the trail was luminescent at night. So it was actually highlighted, and it was solar of some sort, so that during the day it charged and at night it glowed in the dark. Those are things for down the road. I'm not even thinking about that right now. It is in the dream of, I would love it to be paved from here to Toppenish tomorrow if possible, but that's not realistic.
HollyAnna, as I recall on the survey that we did when we asked people how they would use the trail, I don't recall exactly, but I believe that it was fairly utilitarian. It was people saying, I need to get from home to work, from school to home. And so above recreation, I think that there, as you mentioned, those much needed areas that we'll target first on the trail, people just need to get places. And so that would be one of the primary purposes of the trail itself.
The other thing that came up on those surveys, thinking about it now, was people were saying, if there was a park and ride, I would park here and ride the Pato bus to work and then ride it back. And if it was somewhere along the trail, then, I could take my kids for a walk before we go home. So that way that they get some exercise in, so they're not tearing apart the house. And so there were some of those kind of comments made, wanting that kind of, and it was very few were saying, I would use it for recreation. It was more for functionality and from getting from point A to point B.
Thanks. I think even as you were describing the skateboarder, and I think in your photos of the mother with the two kids in the stroller, I'm really struck by this. These stories as are just really valuable in painting the picture of the need, right? And so there's a question about how you are and how you envision sharing the stories of communities throughout the Yakama Nation along the trail.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? You're kind of garbled.
Oh, so the question is about storytelling and how you envision or how you are sharing those stories that you obviously shared with us today of communities throughout the Yakama Nation along the trail.
I can jump in here, HollyAnna, if you want me to. Long term on the communications piece, we are going to get social media, a Facebook page up, as well as a web page where it will be, divided into a variety of segments. One, how can you get involved? Two, our stories of the Yakama Valley, and just what's new with this trail system. So that will be a couple different avenues to which we can share the stories of the trail. HollyAnna touched on the app. We definitely see a need and the value down the road of having an interactive trails map. That way on the app itself, people can track their mileage, share what they've done with their friends. They can let people know where they are in the app, as well as they can probably click on certain elements and see the history along the trail of where they are. This is just years down the road, but I think we'll probably have a lot of sections on the trail where you can pull over, read something about what the grass is or what happened there or what historic event happened. So along the trail itself, I think long-term, the plan is to tell the stories along the path. HollyAnna?
Yeah, so for example, say that you're in Wapato. A section of the trail would, if they want it, we haven't even had a chance to talk to the right people yet. I have talked to individuals who belong to the Buddhist temple, but like the Buddhist temple in Wapato was the first Buddhist temple in Oregon Territory. So it was there before Washington was even a state. And so one of the things that I want to give them as an option is to adopt maybe a mile of trail. They could make that their own, tell their story on a storyboard there, and have plants of significance to them, trees of significance to them, and they would be responsible for that section of trail. When I talked about the agriculture and wanting to include the high schools and Head Starts, being able to say, hey, I know coming from the Lower Valley, FFA, they're extremely competitive. Telling Wapato, Toppenish, and White Swan, hey, you want a section of the trail? You take 1 mile of this trail and you make it your own. And then we have a yearly competition and let them showcase their work in FFA. The Head Starts in those towns, being able to say, hey, you want a section of trail? You know, we can give you a half mile of trail. You can put community gardens there. You can share with the Head Start, share with the families. That way, the community will own the trail. And that way, it's less maintenance for the actual trail itself, because you're going to let this community buy into it and make it their own and make them responsible. And that's the best way to teach kids from Head Start to say, hey, this is your section of trail. You need to take care of it. That way you're going to have less graffiti, less destruction. And that way, you know, if you make it theirs, they will take care of it. And that's just one thing that we're looking at as, how do we do this maintenance part? How do we do this? You know, that we know that's a future challenge, but I really truly believe that if you give the community a chance to buy in at the beginning, and they will own it.
That's really neat, and I think that's a great place to end. I feel like the core of this is community ownership from beginning to end. Well, it never ends, right? Because then it's maintenance. But I want to thank you both for being here with us. This sounds like such a cool trail network that I'm excited to hear about as it progresses and as the planning progresses into the first segments and beyond. And so we'll have you back at a future summit so we can hear more about it, and that'd be great. Thank you both. We have one last session, as I said earlier, at 4 p.m. It's our last final summit session for the year. And I know that Tamar just dropped a feedback form into the chat. And so if you do have feedback for us on this session, then please do share it. And then with that, I wish you all a good afternoon, and thanks for joining us.